So we start off with our usual prayer. Student and teacher. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavai Tejasvinavaditam Astoma Vidvishavai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy. May our study be illumined. May we not unnecessarily argue with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So today is Vedanta series question answer. If you don't have any questions, we don't have any answers. So there is one question in the pipeline, which I might see if I can interweave an answer to that into any other answer to any other question. So I'm going to mute myself while you formulate your ideas and see if there's a question you can come up with.
And that's basically a question that was asked like a while ago as well by Einstein. If there, and that's the question still remaining basically. Like when there is, like, I all want good for you around, in these meetings, but it's so intrinsic to our own human nature that it's knowing when there is no one observing the moon, is the moon still there?
All right, thank you. Yes. The normal way of viewing the world is as a reality, but the reality is about objects that shift and change. They move. The most ancient scientists of the Far East had this beautiful, beautiful term for the entire existence, what we call the world, the observable universe, and they call that Jagat. Jagat means the thing that constantly changes. To observe something constantly changing, there must be some unchanging principle there. And the Vedanta philosophy identifies this as Atman, that is, a thinker, a knower, a witness, all in one, in contrast to all the things that change. And we can also squeeze these changing things into various categories. These categories we can call fields of observation, each one having a different observer that in relation to the field stands still. So the obvious examples for that would be if we see a whole plethora of forms and names and colors and sounds, if that's what the senses all pick up, understanding we can only pick up one fully at any one time, the others fade away, knowing that itself will be a world of change. So there's a technical term for that. Kshetra is the term, literally field. Now it's the same translation in English as we find in Sanskrit. That is, it is something that can be observed, something where we can operate in, we can make that our field of experience. And we can also take it another way. Yesterday was a great, great deal of celebration because Ireland in a rugby test match beat the All Blacks of New Zealand. And because it's a tough challenge, there was a great, great celebration throughout the whole of Ireland, I would hope. And certainly I would know that. And they play on a field also. But they have a very different view of life than we do. Because rugby is a very, very tough, rough game. Rugby is a wonderful sport. You get completely beaten up, noses are broken, joints are put out of sync, bruises, cuts, and after the whole thing, the players shake each other's hands, hug each other warmly, and probably go off for some social interaction. So, what is the difference? The difference is that we view life in a very different way. That's one side of it. So our view of life is very limited. We cannot see the totality all in one go. We can only see segments of it, fragments of it. And the eyes and the ears and so on are designed to suitably pick up what we observe. One of those observation points is what we call the moon, but it requires an observer. Now, in the normal way of looking at things, the moon is always there. It's always there as long as my eyes are there to see it, as long as waves are there to connect it. Because although from 1905, Einstein did away with the ether, that is a media for things to travel through. Light has to travel through it. Because you cannot have action at a distance. Even now, that's a principle. There's no such thing as action at a distance. So if I want to travel from here to Belfast, they won't give me a light that has a beam that lights up something like 200-300 kilometers, or let's say 250 kilometers. They'll give me a set of headlamps that can light up the next 20 meters. When I get to the end of it, another 20 meters. I don't even have to wait to the end of it. As I advance, more meters are presented so that I can see the road section by section. In this life, we don't have to see the whole thing. We can be satisfied with what we know and step toward that. So our equipment is very limited. That doesn't mean to say it's useless. It has every facility. These are faculties which are designed to be used in revealing small things bit by bit. Same thing with the entire universe. To reveal the whole thing in one go is not possible to our relative perception. So it has to be revealed step by step in small fragments. Reveal this, reveal that. But one thing we know about the world of relativity is that there is a causation for it. And the principle of ether is still valid. Today we call it fields, that's all. So these are interchangeable terms nowadays. Except people don't like the word ether, because this was a concept that was there for millennia. It was tough to change. Richardson and Morley in the 19th century changed it because they discovered that light travels at a constant speed regardless, everywhere, and therefore you have to do away with this medium. But even so, gravity requires a field. The moon has a pull, not because it acts at a distance, but because the gravitational field embraces the earth. So there's always a connectedness. So there's always a connectedness everywhere. But now when you investigate this without the sense organs, how does it look? So the great idealist Kant came to this conclusion. What we see outside is only an X, and inside is a mind that interprets it, without which the X, as understood by the Y, the mind, does not exist. This is the idealist point of view. And relatively speaking, it's true. The problem with the relativity of perception is there's no standard answer to anything. Because the counter question is, from which point of view are you standing? Let us take the great discovery. The same people who discovered this Jagat, they also investigate the psychology of consciousness. They also realized 3 fields can be presented there as well. The waking field, from that point of view, the moon exists whenever, whether I'm looking, whether I'm not. We assume, we make the assumption. But in the dream, it's gone. We're not concerned with it. Even the question doesn't arise. In a dreamless sleep, the whole thing is gone. So does it exist or not? The question, from which state are you viewing it? Because in the dreamless sleep state, there's nothing, there are no divisions. There's no duality. There's only a monistic view, which we call peace. So we have to be satisfied with a relative answer when we ask these questions. From the point of view of general relativity, the moon exists always and is subject to causality. It's the same as asking from the waking state. But from the quantum world is equivalent to asking from the dream state or dreamless sleep state, what exists? There we have to resort to equations of quantum. These equations are also equations of Maya. And it doesn't begin with quantum physics. It begins with special relativity. Special relativity tells us, and this is Einstein, who is in a deterministic world, but even so, his special relativity contradicts himself, contradicts his general relativity. What he says is there are no photons at all. There's no light. There is only the perceiver. He puts it as a wonderful equation. I think I've given it to you before. I'll put it up on the board if you can see it. He says S. I hope you can see that.
Yes.
Yes, so S means the total time-space separation between two events, here and there, and then and now, makes us see things light years away as if they were now, but we're always seeing things in the past. So we're always seeing things according to the light that comes from the sun, 8.5 minutes away. The sun is 8.5 minutes away. Even if you look at the fingernails close to you, split seconds away, we're looking at everything in the past because of the speed of light. So what is the time-space separation between two events? What we know is that if there's no interference, that is, if it's in a vacuum, the phrase that he uses is in vacua, is like this. Now he puts it as a more complicated equation. He puts a squared here, but anyway, we can leave it out. If you simplify it, you have x. X means space. Anybody who wants to measure a room will know you have to take length times breadth times height. It's three-dimensional. So when you do a Pythagoras geometric equation, you take all sides into consideration, length times breadth times height, but the whole thing comes to x. X means space. Space squared, and it comes here as a plus. We would expect the next portion of it also to come as a plus. Mathematically, that's what they want, but it doesn't. It comes as a minus t. All this is squared, of course. This minus t means that this goes to 0. It means the sum space, the total space-time separation between two events equals 0. It means there's only one thing there, a perceiver. Now we know that about dreams. You know there's only one perceiver in a dream. All the dream is the dreamer's dream. But we didn't technically know this about the waking state. In the waking state, only the perceiver is there. This is pure Vedanta, because Vedanta tells us, actually, there are multiple fields in front, but the one that never changes is the perceiver, the witness, the knower, the thinker. And there's nothing more powerful than thought. And when thought goes from it, as it were, it goes through a series of transformations that we can poetically call angels or devas or gods. We can call it divine energies. So his energies are flowing, God's energies are flowing everywhere. And thought mobilizes these and gives us gifts of scenarios, rewards, but also other things, whatever we think, we'd get the result. The key to positive thinking is to understand the principle that every thought that goes out is more powerful than a sunbeam and has its effect, its transforming effect amongst all the energies, the divine energies. We can view them like rays of the sun, and one central sun there that doesn't move. You can think of it in this way. The core of something there, and we are seeing the rays. All of these things, moon, sun, body, mind, whiteboard, computer, all of these are crystallized forms of these waves. This principle has to be repeated over and over and over again, but how do we actually know it? We only know it by cultivating the quality of purity of mind. But this is one of the first equations of Maya that tells us that the moon does not exist when we do not perceive it. And don't tell me it's not Einstein's equation. This is Einstein's equation, which he forgot all about. He himself said once the mathematicians got hold of this, he himself never understood special relativity. But it's there, and it's there very clearly. And the equation works. It's worked for over 100 years. It's worked since 1905. It's been tried and tested. We can't argue with equations. But this is against all our instincts or our gut, because this is an equation of Maya. And Maya is inscrutable. The Vedas will tell us that Maya is inscrutable. We can't determine what it is. And therefore, we are not really dealing with an actual universe. That's our final conclusion. Don't think that this universe is subject to conventional causation. It is not. This whole universe is subject to apparitional causation. It is like a kind of magic show. It's when we look at it closely, it all disintegrates and disappears. And when we sit in the highest position, where we sit in the place of the Supreme Principle, the whole of this world, sun, moon, everything, relationships, bank account, all that disappears. It's gone. Finished. It's finished. When you then experience this highest level, this samadhi, this nirvikalpa samadhi, nothing else exists in the concepts of Buddhism is nirvana. It means you've extinguished not only desires. The desires are the fuel on which this world moves. It's an echo of the Bhagavad Gita that tells us, and the Upanishads that tells us, that this world has come from yajna, a kind of sacrificing. That is a law of causation. If you want to create something that seems to be new, the old thing has to die. This is not permanent transformation. This is temporary transformation. Things are coming and going all the time, moving in flux all the time. Now, if we want to study the moon seriously, then we become an astronomer, look through a nice, powerful telescope, see the wonderful craters of the moon, understand the shining part of it in the craters is caused by glass. Things bombarded there, asteroids and so on, and spit up a whole explosion of silica. That's what makes the moon shine in those spots. That's one way of looking at it. But think what is required. The moon itself is required. The telescopic apparatus is required, considered as an extension of the eyeball. The media through which we are looking has to be there also. The light, reflected light has to be there. Photons have to reach us. And they reach us in a certain time ago. But what we're actually looking at comes down to this equation, and there's only one perceiver. But there are many different ways of looking at the same thing. So we have to take this relativity of perception quite seriously and say, for 20 different shifts of perception, there are 20 different answers we can give. The simplest example, or the most radical, I suppose, example of this is my statements on reincarnation. I created a lot of confusion by making a statement when I was in Paris a few weeks ago. And in an informal discussion in the evening, I was saying, with a sense of fun, we're discussing what about reincarnation. I said, I don't believe in it. Of course, the reason why I say that is because there's a little bit of a devil in me that wants to stir things up. and make people look at things in a different way. As soon as you shift your position in a different way, you come to a position of Advaita non-dualism, which is like a multi-purpose tool. It holds all the answers. And I said, no, I don't believe in incarnation because I don't believe in this incarnation. Many of you are familiar with that standard fun answer I give. And but I also said, of course, we have to believe in incarnation because every cell of the body is doing it. At breakfast, the poor person said to me, but I don't understand. You don't believe in reincarnation? I said, no, of course I believe in it. Every cell of the body is doing it, but looked at from a different point of view, from a higher point of view, that changes the answer, changes the position. And we have to have that flexibility to shift our position. If we stand in a fixed position, it'll be a narrowing position and it'll close our minds. And that's very counterproductive to any kind of discovery. So this is one of three equations of Maya, and this would be one of them, excuse me. Coming from the position of special relativity in 1905 already. In that same paper, comes in the appendix, E equals M. Energy is equivalent to mass. In other words, everything is energy. And the only kind of energy there can be is potential energy, of course, is what it's always referring to. And what is the potential within a gram of something? And the potential within a gram of something is enormous. It's capable of blowing up a whole town. And you go to the shops and you buy several grams of something. You have no idea of the capacity it has, the potential it has to be explosive. So it has the same capacity as a Hiroshima bomb, nuclear bomb. So we don't realize that everything is energy. Now, what kind of energy? There's an inward pulling and outward pulling energy. And when you see how it balances out, it's equivalent. It requires the same struggle to push things out as it does to pull things in, and it equates to something like 500 atom bombs per pound, leaving you with a zero. So there's another zero yet. So that E equals zero. And then you have Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. This whole thing is uncertain. Heisenberg's uncertainty principle says you cannot fix where a thing is and at the same time know what it's doing to a certain small level. Small level will be this over pi. Don't worry about that. You don't have to know anything about it. It's called Planck's constant. So this is the uncertain world we're looking at. Here's the issue. Whether you understand this or not, here is the dilemma we all have. This world is not what it seems. We have to get used to that. What will we do about it? Well, we have to be practical. We have to say, all right, this is all very well theoretically. It has nothing to do with my eyes and ears. It has nothing to do with my gut. My gut says this world is real, the moon is real, the sun is real, everything is real. Everything is permanent, even though we know it's shifting and dying and changing. Still, we ignore that part and we deal with the world as it seems. And as it seems, we regard that as it seems, we push that away. All right, what will we do with it? We can have a philosophy that says it's something like a game of life. And if that is true, then we can make some sense of things. And we should not take the world as seriously as we think it might be. How do we get to this point of view? We can understand time and time again the same principle has to be endorsed over and over and over again. We have to understand two broad paths are put out as suggested paths in the Bhagavad Gita. Let's deal with the first one, path of knowledge, jnana yoga. It's meant for people with subtle intellect, keen understanding. It's not for the vast majority. Vast majority will find their delight in work. And in chapter 3 of the Bhagavad Gita will emphasize this aspect, and we'll join it with this concept of yajna, sacrifice. So that path is karma yoga. Karma yoga means taking all my activities, doing all my activities, and dedicating them to the divine, registering them to the divine's account, practicing that. But both paths ultimately lead to the same goal. And for each one, the first thing that must come is mental purity. We won't discover anything unless we have this mental purity. When we discuss these questions, does a tree fall in a forest if no one is looking at it? All these various philosophical manipulations. We also have to ask us a counter question. How does this help us? If we get the answer to it, it might help us understand the rationale of it, but it doesn't help us in this key factor, purifying the mind. Mental purity is essential, and all paths are designed to equip the mind, to make the mind fit for receiving revelation and grace from within. So this principle has to be repeated time and time again, because what is mental purity means that amongst the various forces that make the whole of the existence, that we characterize as gunas, the things that binds things together. And binding has two aspects to it. The one is restricting, tying up, imprisoning. The other one is the freeing aspect. Knowing it, in contrast, we can see, I am already free. And the cultivation of this will be the sattva aspect, purity, illumination, light, pure strength, goodness, truthfulness, glory. Don't say what a pity, say what a glory. In contrast to this is egocentric activities, and thought is part of that. Egocentric thought that leads to egocentric actions and brings to us a painful result, unbeknown to us at the time, because we are short-sighted. Don't think if you have glasses that you're short-sighted and that's the end of it. No, mentally we're short-sighted. We don't see the longer picture. If we did, we would invest our energies in a different way. We would choose a different path. And then this tamas is this inertial aspect of it. From time to time, we all feel that way. A little lazy, a little lack of enthusiasm. And then we also see how we are hugely enthusiastic one moment, how we want to sweep the floors, make, even in spiritual life, convert people, tell people about new creative ideas. It's not wrong, but if it's egocentric, it creates difficulty for us. We don't use this light and shade as, strictly speaking, right or wrong. There's a rationale behind it. It's in terms of the effects. And the effects will be on us and everybody. And so there's every reason for us to change behaviors. So now one question in connection with all of this rose, and I'll read the question out. Because it's in question with the theme, and what is raised is a question of, in playing this game, I'll rephrase the question like this. In playing this game, what part should we play? How will we know what the part is? And this part in this row is called swatanma. So the question goes literally like this. When you spoke about swatanma, you mentioned it as the divine purpose for which we are destined or born to. How do we understand what is our swatanma? I'll deal with that first question first. We're born with two sets of equipments, if you like, or backgrounds. One is called guna. Same thing as this rope idea. Guna, in this case, it means an inborn quality. The next is called karma. that is something that is developed. Sometimes we can characterize this as nature-nurture, and it's a nurturing aspect that we deal with in terms of the Enneagram, which is coming up in a few weeks' time. If you're interested in it and haven't registered, strongly recommend that you register it, because we don't have a standard ego. We have our own individual difficulty. Unless we really truly understand that, we won't know how to deal with it, because it is the thing that is blocking us the most in our progress. It is also the thing that we are most proud of, therefore that makes it difficult to handle. There's that statement, you see, I'm humble and proud of it. You see, it's a contradiction in terms. So this egoism is a contradiction in terms like that. So how do we know what role to play, assuming a philosophy that this is a game? In France, when I was there a few weeks ago, I introduced participants there to Florence Scovel-Shinn's book, simple book, small book, The Game of Life and How to Play It. And I didn't know whether it was available in French, but they tell me, yes, they found it in French. It's a profound book, written very long time ago, in the 1930s already, in response to the World War that had gone, and also the possibility of another one coming. How can we avoid such a disaster? Well, we have to learn to glide across the border of any circumstance and play the game nicely, play the game well. So I can read a little bit from this. Most people consider life a battle, is the introduction to this book. See, that's the fact of it. Supposing you think that this is a battle and not a game, you'll have a completely different outlook on life and your action will be totally different. You'll be a serious-minded person. You won't see the fun, even the principle of the fun of a play of waves. So most people, not just a few, most people consider life a battle. But it is not a battle. It's a game. It is a game, however, which cannot be played successfully without the knowledge of spiritual law. She's not using the term Vedanta, even though clearly this is what she studied. She's saying spiritual law. Then, because she's Christian, she puts it in Christian language. As Christ taught that it was a great game of giving and receiving. In other words, causality. We don't understand that, normally speaking. Impulsively, we give some action, not really carefully considering what is the consequence of it. Prior to my speaking here, for the first time in a long time, I'm kind of recuperating from whatever it was. And so I went for a walk. And I walked with Swami Purnananda. We had a nice walk. And every person I met, I greeted. And his question to me, whether you know it or whether you know the person or not, you give a greeting. I said, yes. I said, it's a formula, of course, that Patanjali recommends. Be friendly to all, friendliness to everybody. Be happy for the successful. Friendly to all. If you're friendly to everybody and have a friendly smile, of course not too friendly smile, because people wonder what your grimace is about, and they'll be put off. So a genuine smile that shows a glowingness from within, that is based on an insight. Here's a person walking toward me. Actually, it is God dressed up like this, playing a game with me. Whatever that person says, I'm not bothered whether it's praise or blame, whether it's an insult, or whether it's a sunny greeting. But generally speaking, if you move towards somebody with a smile on your face and greet them, what will be their response? They'll want to echo that response. As social psychologists may make a big meal of that and say, inbuilt within us is a social need for us to echo the other person's body language, speech, and so on, to be accepted. Be that as it may or not, it is a disarming thing So why not be a beam of energy, a beam of love, spreading love, blessings everywhere? Isn't that a better attitude toward people than criticize them, blaming them? See the mother's words, don't blame, don't criticize. In fact, make every stranger feel at home. Make the whole world your own. This is the language that Sharada Devi uses. So every person I greeted, and that was his question. I said, yes, greet everybody, because what is the alternative? You see, this is a game of giving and receiving. It's a very precise game. What you give, you will receive. Sowing and reaping, this is the law. Whatsoever a man soweth, she continues, that shall he also reap. This means that whatever a man sends out in word or deed will return to him. Whatever he gives, he will receive. Now we can evaluate that. Yesterday's performance, what did we give? Whatever we gave, we'll receive. We can't complain when it comes back to us. What a terrible life I'm living. People don't like me. People blame me. They looked on the YouTube and they saw Swami speaking and they saw how he was humming and hawing, coughing. What a terrible thing. Why does he do all this? Why does he appear on YouTube? It'd be much better sitting in the monastery doing nothing. You look at that, what does it matter to me? If I take it seriously, the game is gone. That's the difficulty. We are taught also that the imaging faculty plays a leading part in the game of life. Jesus is asked, a kind of a walking tour. The episode is he curses a barren fig tree, and his followers are astonished. He makes a point. He says, greater things than this can you do. If you say to that mountain, move, it'll move. Then he gives the key to it. Believe that it is already accomplished in the past, already done, finished. What does it require? This whole world is constructed from imagination. All our fears are imagination-based. All our fears of the future are imagining the thing that is yet to come. And all the things in our past are imagining things that are no longer with us. Using this imagining faculty, we have access to a great creative tool. We can create our own circumstances, make it better. We can indeed rise awake. We can stop not until the goal is reached. We can gather our strength, all our energies, and move them in a positive way. Then the world becomes positive for us. Whatever we think we get. Supposing I'm a painter, and I carefully paint a picture, as I have done in the past, a portrait of Swami Vivekananda, a portrait of Ramakrishna, imagining him at the age of 25. Seeing how his eyes shine, seeing the various hues and colors on the skin, trying to mix colors in such a way you get it exactly right, and the textures right, so that it actually looks like a living thing. Then won't his smile infect me? Except I won't take it as a dangerous infection. I'll take it as a delight. I've just borrowed his smile just by looking at it, echoing it. Whatever I meditate on, whatever I think, whatever the mind dwells on, will come to me. Why don't I construct scenes like that? Use the full faculty of this imagination. And this is the key to promoting sattva. We promote sattva by constantly using our imagination in this way. So she goes on, keep thy heart or imagination with all diligence. She supports this by quoting something from the Psalms, or the Proverbs actually in this case. This means that what you imagine, what man images, sooner or later externalize in his affairs. And then she gives a number of examples in this, both positive and negative. Then a most important statement, coming to the question of Swadharma. I'll complete the question and then we'll see the full context of this question. So, given that most of us have lived and taken career or personal choices in life, How do we change course from our understanding of Swadharma? How do we differentiate it with our personality derived from the Enneagram? This person has been on the Enneagram. All right. Now there's an assumption within the question that we're not employing our role. And I think that is maybe something that has to be examined. Maybe you are. Because wherever you stand, you can view it as a build-up of circumstances that naturally made you arrive there. And so there's every reason to assume whatever you're doing is probably your individual role. That is the individual input that you have that is full of truth and purity and goodness that contributes toward the overall. That is that piece of the jigsaw that makes the whole jigsaw complete. The particular role in the play without which the play doesn't work. To understand this, Florence Scovel puts it beautifully. She says, there is a place that you are to fill, that no one else can fill. Something that you are to do, which no one else can do. There is a perfect picture of it in the superconscious mind. She's using this phrase that we find in Swami Vivekananda's Raja Yoga, taking the mind in 3 sections. Unconscious mind, where most of our activity takes place. The conscious mind that gives us access is the key to the unconscious area. And the superconscious mind, that area that we need to get into. And as soon as we get into it, more questions and more answers arise from within. It is like continuously opening up flowers, bit by bit, where we get an internal opening, an awakening of different levels of the mind, different levels of consciousness. And we have a perfect picture of it there in the superconscious mind. It usually flashes across the conscious mind as an unattainable goal. That's the first clue. What is the thing that I should be doing that I would want to do the next, the best? In terms of these 2 faculties that I have. On the one side, guna, the thing I inherited from my past life, and karma, the thing that I develop in this life. This combination of these 2 will give us the clue. What is my individual role? And the third component, how does it contribute toward the overall good? Everything that we do in a worthwhile way, we'll do it. Furthermore, whatever we do, Swadharma, the Dharma part is only complete once we add this karma yoga aspect to it. That is, we do everything as a yajna. We do everything as a worship. In the old days, worship was putting things into the fire, considering that the fire is the symbol of God leading his devotee forward and upwards. So what is our dharma? Our contribution toward our individual, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual harmony that harmonize also with all other things and all other beings, not going against that. Then we have to assume that this is a divine role with a divine play and a divine part in it that is divinely provided. That means where we stand now, that's probably it. Because if it feels natural, if it feels delightful, of course there are many people who change course in their life, seeing something more natural. But that's only because they see so many natural obstacles in the way. It's as if the divine is saying, my child, please go this way. And we say, no, I want to go this way. All right, so be it. But you'll bang your head, you'll come across red stoplights and decide, no, I should have gone this way. Like walking in a forest that you've never been to before, and you have multiple choices, say 3. One path can lead this way, one this way, then this way. And you want to get back to where you started. Then as you go along the path, you see where you want to go is getting more and more distant. All right, you have to turn back. You try another one. It's going in the opposite direction. All right, then you go down a third one. And you see you're destiny getting nearer and nearer, closer and closer to you. That's the right way. That's the right path. It will occur to you in an easy and natural way. All successful people will look out, have the patience to observe this flow of green lights, and we're adding a divine dimension to it. This flow is not haphazard. It's not caused by any chance. It is there, it's directed for our own individual unfoldment. Come on, come on, come on. And that is the particular divine. We might call it in biological terms, speciation. I always use that example, that in Zimbabwe, we started the whole Vedanta movement with a farm. Somebody donated a farm in a place called Rua. And there was a goat there. And I sat and ate bananas. And the goat also sat there nicely as my companion, eating bananas. But I know it could just as equally eat my cloth. And in eating its bananas, Patanjali Yoga Sutras gives us a very careful idea of speciation. That the speciation is from inside, it's uncoiling from inside. Having the same diet, I can assure you, I never grew horns, and the goat never gave lectures, fortunately for both of us. So there's something within us that presents us with a unique individuality, represented on the human hand as fingers, fingerprints, representing in the inner coiled up aspect with the nucleus of our cell, called deoxyribonucleic acid, our individual complete architectural plan. Whatever you have been, whatever you are now, whatever you will be, is contained in there, ready to unfold. So successful people have faith. Faith in what? Well, they have faith that nature is going to provide everything, that the plan is going to unfold. And alertness, alert enough to see what the flow is, where the indicators of the flow is, where the green lights are. And having understood where the green lights are, having confidence that they are well equipped, having confidence in their own skills and abilities comprised of guna and karma, they go ahead with the next important component, hard work. Now, the Vedantic practitioner, the yogi, will have an additional successful component that enriches the whole process. He'll attribute all of this to the divine. The whole of nature is divine. It's in my favor. It's unfolding. It's unfolding within me. It's presenting me with resources and opportunities from one side, unasked. And it's pushing me from within, what in epigenetics is called Waddington's trough. He has the idea that things are pushing you from behind and pulling you from in front. And in that way, every cell is sorting themselves out like a mosaic, a self-regulating mosaic, like nail filings. If you put a magnet underneath a table, they'll all collate into patterns. They'll respond to a magnetic polarity. So this magnetism, this magnetic pull, is from what we call God. And that's why we call this God, one name would be Hari. That means the thing that we are attracted to, magnetically attracted to. So being magnetically attracted to, the next thing we do is mindfully we do all these activities with a sense of adoration and worship. Every activity is a sacred activity, removing any barrier between secular and sacred immediately. So, something too good, this unattainable goal, something too good to be true, but it comes as a vision, comes as a divine flash, and we move naturally toward it. In reality, it is man's true identity, or man's true destiny or destination. There is for each person perfect self-expression, something which he has to do that no one else can do. It is his destiny. Very often people say, when I say this, that no, other people can do this, other people can do that. Yes, but there's something only you can do with the collection of all your talents and abilities. Not everybody has that same collection. The collection is unique. This achievement is held a perfect idea in the divine mind, awaiting man's recognition. And as the imaging faculty is the creative faculty, it is necessary for man to see the idea before he can manifest it. You have to have it as a clear vision. Catch that inspiration, take it seriously, test it out, and keep it clear. Revisit it often. So man's highest demand is for the divine design of his life. His demand should be, infinite spirit, open the way for the divine design of my life to manifest. Now we're giving you a method. I'll repeat it. So man's highest demand, not prayer, demand, because it's his right, is for the divine design for his life or of his life. His demand should be, infinite spirit, open the way for the divine design of my life to manifest. Let the genius in me now be released. Let me see clearly the perfect plan. I was addressing some people the other day, school teachers, and I told them something they already knew. Education is already new now in this modern context. You're not teaching a child anything new or stuffing information into their heads, as Vivekananda puts it. All you're doing really is coaxing the knowledge from within. The knowledge is already within them, coaxing it from within and manifesting their full potential in every area of their life from within. That is what it is. In the single terms for Dharma, all of this is implied. Perfect self-expression, the author goes on, will never be a labor, but of such absorbing interest that it will seem almost like play. I always remember one devotee in Zimbabwe who was a sign writer. In those days, these days, of course, if you want a sign, it's all printed and it's all done by computers. But in the older times, they would have done all the signs, commercial signs would have been handwritten. And they did them like Michelangelo painted the portraits on the Sistine Chapel, or the figures there. You take some paper and you mark out what you want in pencil. And then along the lines, you punch it. It's called punching. You put small holes. And in those holes, you put some chalk, or in Michelangelo's case, carbon. And then you press it on the ceiling and it leaves the imprint. Then it's painting in. Now you might say that doesn't seem very skillful. Yeah, no, it's skillful. The mix of the painting is the skill in getting the expression on people's faces. So it's not exactly coloring in by numbers, but it's something like that. But I always remember him saying, I'm so fortunate that I do the thing that I love day in, day out. I love doing this. I'm an artist. And in his spare time, he used to do portraits. Such beautiful portraits. He would take a picture or a painting and he would divide it into squares, minute squares. And each one he would carefully paint and replicate exactly the colors and expressions. And there was a great skill in that. But we should all be doing something that we love. And so, of course, something that we love will always have, if you don't take it as a divine worship, will always have an element of tedium, unless and until you take it as a worship. That then makes it something that we love. This then becomes karma yoga. So, perfect self-expression will never be a labor, but of such absorbing interest that it will seem almost like a play. See the word self-expression. All of this is self-expression. The student knows also that as man comes into the world, financed by God, how beautiful language she uses. Financed by God. God's making it an investment. All this is financed by him. The supply needed for his perfect self-expression will be at hand. What we call Swadharma is this perfect divine self-expression. God, seated within, knows how to steer you to the respective places worthy of his children. It's a beautiful, beautiful book, giving many examples by Florence Scovel Shinn. It dates back to maybe 1930 something, 1932, I think it is. Anyway, all right. So I hope
Swami, I have a question. Now that you are finished, like you mentioned, I mean, I think I misheard. Like you mentioned the gods,
yes.
like plural, isn't it? Like
Yes.
yeah, okay.
Yes. See, when we say gods, we're using a very, very poor English translation of this term. Devas. Devas does not mean gods. It has no theological implication. So, unfortunately, if we want to translate it better, we can say shining things, illuminating factors. And in philosophy, we call these tanmatras, or you can say divine energies. So the sun's divine energies are the radiating rays that go everywhere. We can't say they're different from the sun. It's only God's manifested energies, God's radiation coming, crystallizing in, through, as the world. These are the devas. They come out as you and me, in you and me as Indriyas. Indra is the chief of these deities in mythology. Yes, mythologically they're described as personalities. But actually, there's no mythology without philosophy. And there's no philosophy without mystic investigation. And there's no mystic investigation without meditation. And there's no meditation without discipline and regulation of your life. This is the process. I hope that's clear.
Well, it is like, I'm doing my research as well at the same time, like, for example, I see that, in there is different places around the world which are called like, lands of the gods, so, like, that's a fact, that's a fact that obviously I see, but, it's like, okay, so it's not something that I have invented. So, and around, from my studies, that's...
You see, when Indologists start studying the Indian systems,
yes,
they compare them to the Western systems. Western system means Greek mythology, where there's a pantheon of gods.
mm-hmm.
And these gods have human characteristics. They behave very badly, worse than humans. They have affairs, they get drunk. These are the gods. And Socrates rebelled against that. Socrates said no. And for that, he had to take his poison. His hemlock, he had to drink that because he was accused of upsetting the youth. There was upsetting the deities of the day. But these deities are not taken very seriously because any emperor who behaved well or badly could elevate himself to a god. And so in many of the Roman emperors would have done that. And the Christians came across this because the Christians were deemed atheists because they never believed in any of these gods. And they never, absolutely never, worshipped the emperor as a god. Now you can disbelieve in all of the other gods, that's okay. But to disbelieve in the emperor as a god is tantamount to being a traitor. And that is why the Christians became persecuted and got such a hard time. Now you can't compare these two things. So in the early days of the Vedas, there might well have been an element of polytheism. We don't know. But on closer examination, you might find that what we call all these devas, in mythology they came out like that as a pantheon of deities. But actually in the original Vedas, I think they were symbols and they were qualities. And the symbols were more to do with physics and cosmology. Anyway, the way it should be taken is that these come out as Mahabhutas. Now, if you want to study this properly, according to the Vedas, you have to go to the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad and study this very carefully. There's a conversation, but telling conversation between Gargi and Yajnavalkya. Gargi, incidentally, is a female sage. And she asks a very permanent question to Yajnavalkya: how many are these devas? Sorry, there's another part of a question that I have to read. How many are these devas? And it turns out that what people are calling innumerable devas, that is, some 3,033, would be merely manifestations of categories of 33 things. And these 33 things themselves are categories. So with every question that is asked, it's reduced, ultimately to 6, ultimately to 3, ultimately to 2.5, ultimately to 1.5, ultimately to 1. So the ultimate question, answer to the question, how many, is 1. That means that the Vedic religion and its descendant of Hinduism is a purely monotheistic religion that finds its final conclusion in monism, non-dualism. And so I'm keen everywhere to point out that so-called Hinduism is not polytheistic. We constructed the material and curriculum for the secondary schools, and we're busy now involved in doing it for the junior schools here in Ireland. And unfortunately, on the opening page, Hinduism is a polytheistic religion. No, it's a pluralistic religion. It allows you so many different ways. Don't confuse it with polytheism. Don't think there are many gods. No. So we use the term devas, and we have to use it in its correct context. It comes from the same root diva that lends itself to Diwali, Festival of Lights. Diva, Dipa means light, illuminating factor, something that shines. Your eyes shine, the sun shines, stars shine. All these are illuminating factors, and they can come back to 5 principal devas or energies. And these energies are called Mahabhutas or Tanmatras. These are the angels, or if you want to use your poetic imagination, the deities. That's all. It's just a question of language. So there was a devotee who told me yesterday, actually, said, my son has an argument with the religious teacher at his school who tells him Hinduism is polytheistic. And he says, no, miss, Hinduism is not polytheistic, it's monotheistic. No, it's polytheistic. And he's saying, look, I've spoken to a Swami here, and he's told me on reliable authority, and I'm a Hindu and I know, it is definitely not polytheistic. So you see these misunderstandings come, and it's not trivial. It's not trivial because such misunderstandings have created great bloodshed, death to millions and millions of people by those who accuse others of this polytheism based on this idea of this 2 things. Firstly, the fact that the Greeks had this pantheon of deities, Romans also had it, Egyptians also had it, although ultimately they came to a monotheistic conclusion also. But there's also the Abrahamic behind it that makes it completely anathema to have any other gods before the Abrahamic God, or graven images, or all of these things. And this has created great difficulties amongst fanatic Muslims, the most recent of which would have been around the time of Durga Puja in Bangladesh, where I think 300 temples have been desecrated and 7 Brahmins were killed.
My apologies, Swami. I've double checked as well in the Upanishad right now. I see here quote this oneness of soul and God lies at the very root of all Vedic thought, and it is the dominant ideal of the unity of all life and the oneness of two, which make the study of Upanishad especially beneficial at the present moment. End of quote.
Okay, all good. There's another question that came in chat. Swami, sometimes it seems that to flee a situation is the best we can do. Isn't it true? It's not possible to play always the game, like Ramakrishna, not wanting to be mixed with some people. Well, of course, we have to keep holy company. And if it's possible to avoid those people who are going to disturb our mind, yes, we have to do it. But if we have this philosophy of game of life, having said that, there'll be enough obstacles and challenges that will confront us, enough opportunities for us to play the game of life nicely. And we shouldn't pray that there should be no obstacles. In fact, if you have a sporting attitude, maybe your prayer should be, please put more obstacles so I can play the game nicely. If you feel that this is something that suits you, this leads to complete fearless attitude and total enjoyment of the game. And it was Ramakrishna who put this dimension. He puts on the one side Nitya, the eternal, but the other side of the coin, he puts Leela. So this, I think, would be the answer I would hope to your question. You see, retreat or attack or yield, all of these are not suitable because there's a fourth dimension to it, and that is love. We can put in love. And if we see the God in everything, won't we want to play the game with the Lord nicely? I'm never tired of repeating what the Bhagavatam tells us. Krishna makes it very clear. You see, this Leela, this game, is on myself. It's not a cruel joke on you. There's only one thing there. If this is a game, I'm the producer, the director, the player, the stage, the lighting, the plot, the audience, everything, the whole thing. So we have to orientate our way to that kind of approach if we feel it suits us. All right, we'll finish off there. Thank you for putting up with my croaky voice, but it's getting better, and thanks to devotees who brought nourishing soup and herbal medications and so on. So I would like to tell you it helped tremendously. So thank you for that. All right. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.